Hi guys, I'm Vishali. I am back at Cobham. I've been to Antonio Conte's press conference ahead of Chelsea's game with Manchester United. It's a chilly day, but the sky is blue, sun is out, and it was an interesting press conference, I have to say. Let me start off with team news because that's probably what everyone wants to know: whether or not N'Golo Kante will return for that game against United at Stamford Bridge. Now, of course, remember it looked like Kante was going to make his long-awaited return from that hamstring injury against Roma in the Champions League, but he didn't even make Antonio Conte's substitutes bench. Now, Conte was asked about it today, and all he would say is that Kante is progressing well from that injury, but that he's absolutely not going to risk him if he's not 100% fit. So it looks like Kante is going to be assessed tomorrow, and it could be that a late call is made on whether or not to include him. I think if he is included, I actually don't think he'll start. I think he'll make the bench, but I don't think he'll start. So we could see him back in the matchday squad, but whether or not we see him play, I think it really depends on how that game goes. He was also asked about Victor Moses, who of course has also been out with a hamstring injury that he's sustained in that loss to Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, and Conte basically said there's a bit of bad news with Victor Moses. He's got he called it a bad muscular injury. Basically, he said it's a worse injury than originally thought, and it doesn't look like he'll be returning to action in the immediate future. That's obviously a huge blow for Conte and for Chelsea. And then an interesting thing, Conte was asked about Gary Cahill's positioning against Roma, because in that 3-0 loss to Roma in the Champions League, Cahill started the game on the right of a three-man defence. Now, Cahill usually plays on the left, so David Luiz is usually in the middle, Cesar Azpilicueta is usually on the right, but Cahill played on the other side and Antonio Rudiger swapped with him and played on the left. And of course, with Chelsea losing 2-0, Cahill was brought off in the 56th minute. Now, Conte basically admitted today that it was a mistake from him to switch them around, to have Cahill start on the right and not have him on the left. And he basically said, look, he's going to start against Manchester United and he'll start on the left, he'll go back to his usual position, which was an interesting I think it was an interesting point, just Conte admitting that he made a mistake, and he's done it before. He's admitted where he hasn't necessarily made the right decision. But I thought it was really interesting talking about the positioning and the fact that Cahill will start, but he's going to be starting back in his usual position. Now, what you also want to know, I'm sure, is what Conte thinks about Jose Mourinho, because of course they did have two incidents last season when Chelsea played United at Stamford Bridge. The first, of course, was when Mourinho told Conte that he was humiliating him when Chelsea beat United 4-0. The second was in the FA Cup quarter-final game at Stamford Bridge in March, when their pair had to physically be, separated by the fourth official. And all Conte would say today is that it doesn't matter about the relationship between Conte and Mourinho. What matters is really what happens on the pitch. He just said, look, I respect his job, he needs to respect my job. So I'm sure that will be a storyline that people will be keen to look out on Sunday, regardless of what Conte says. And then I think that the third most interesting bit from this press conference was the fact that Conte revealed that Roman Abramovich visited Chelsea's training ground on Sunday, the day after Chelsea beat Bournemouth 1-0 in the Premier League. Now, Conte insisted that it's a normal thing for Roman Abramovich to come here and watch the players train and speak to the players. But of course, it did come off the back of that win to Bournemouth. They had won 3 games in all competitions, but before that they had drawn with Roma 3-3 in the Champions League. They had lost 2 games in the Premier League, and all Conte insisted was that Roman just asked about the game against Bournemouth. He asked about that first game against Roma at Stamford Bridge, but the timing was interesting. I mean, it came 2 days before they played Roma in the Champions League and lost 3-0, but the suggestion was there that it wasn't about results necessarily and about his position at the club.